and welcome everyone to Women's Health Tech Wednesdays. I am your host, Nina Joshi. I'd like to formally bring on Paula. Thanks so much for being here.
Very excited to be here. Thank you. Thank you for asking me to join.
Absolutely. Well, I love, Paula, if maybe we can kick things off by having you kind of formally introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about your background and your journey that has led you to 5AM Ventures.
Sure. So I've been in biotech, biopharma for about 34 years. I started it as a biochemical engineer and had quite a diverse journey. I spent the 21 years at Genzyme in various roles, starting in engineering, but then ultimately my last role there was a general manager of our cardiovascular business. So really bringing products all the way from early stage through approval, launching and commercial responsibility globally around the world. So P&L responsibility around the world. And then from there, I went to Moderna. It was in the early days, pre-COVID. I was about the 20th employee. I was responsible
Wow.
for building out our rare disease and cardiometabolic focus as a member of the executive team, as well as our strategic alliances. And then from there, I had the opportunity to start a new company that I was the founding CEO of, Ixia Therapeutics, and was a wonderful journey. Took that company from the first employee to about 313 countries. Took it public through an IPO and launched 2 rare disease drugs, and also had some significant strategic partnerships with larger pharmaceutical companies. And then about 4 years ago, I left there and wanted to get more on the venture side, entrepreneurial side. And with 5AM Ventures, started a company called Insoma. I ran it for the first 20 months as executive chair, really getting the company off the ground from the seed stage, building it out through its Series A, and then turned it over a couple of years ago to a CEO. And I remain as chairman of the board. And that company is in the in vivo gene editing space of the hematopoietic
Wow.
stem cells. So a very exciting technology. In addition to 5AM, I'm a venture partner, but I'm 2 days a week by design because I really want to leave room for working with other companies. So I have a portfolio of about 6 companies that I work with on the board and advising. And I really enjoy helping companies really on the operating side, building new companies. And so that's also why I'm working with 5AM, is to really help seed and start and build new companies.
That is absolutely incredible. I love to kind of see the evolution of your journey from, engineering to where you are right now. I think I could see the building blocks start to form. I think that is absolutely incredible. I know I have a ton of questions for you about your VC experience, your advisor experience, kind of digging into the weeds of that. But before we go into there, would actually love to start off by hearing some of your insights around kind of mentoring. I know that that's something that you are actively involved in. So I'd love if you could just, share with us, your personal experiences in mentoring and, how that has really aided your professional development and just kind of any thought that you have around that.
Yeah, I could probably speak to an hour alone on just mentoring and sponsorship. It's not just about mentoring with people who sponsor you. And I actively am a mentor today, informally, but even formally for a couple organizations. I'll mention those first, and then I'll talk about how I was mentored and how it shaped me. One is the Tamir Foundation, which is a nonprofit that was established after the late Henry Tamir, who was the CEO of Genzyme and probably my most important mentor. And he really shaped a lot of what the biotech industry, especially in the orphan diseases, but he was a very strong mentor. And so this is an organization that is focused on mentoring the next generation of entrepreneurs. So I actively mentor a lot of first-time CEOs that have just seeding companies very early on in their journey. And then another one where I'm a mentor for is called Tech Forever. It's specifically around women's health technology, and again, it's entrepreneurs that are starting out new companies in that space. Mentoring is such a huge part of what I do today, because I will say it takes up a lot of time, but it's because it was so pivotal for me. When I was at Genzyme, I was a biochemical engineer. That's, I thought, was my trajectory. But even when I was in engineering, I was always kind of looking over the fence to the business side and what really the why of what we were doing, the touching the patients and the physicians. And it was through mentors that really helped me guide me to say, you know what, you can do what you're doing over there in engineering and probably apply it here in some of the other areas. So because of mentors who just gave me a chance to try something different, I was able to go from engineering to then running clinical development programs, to running a business development acquisition where I ran the whole due diligence and then the actual integration. And then another mentor who said, well, you need some P&L responsibility, and gave me responsibility, cut up his P&L basically to myself and others. And I got Japan and Asia Pacific, which was a whole different experience in of itself. All of this stems, though, I think, because the culture at Genzyme, because of our CEO, the late Henry Chimere, who was very, I mean, he took a lot of personal time, even though he was running a 10,000 person company, to sit down and actively mentor people. And I had the fortune of spending a lot of time with him. And there were some seminal moments with that mentoring for me that shaped who I am. But I will pause there because instead of keep talking.
No, this is incredible. And I think you mentioned a couple of things that I love. I think we really talking about how you were really, able to have, it seems like, a culture that really fostered mentorship, that fostered collaboration, which I think is so important. And I like that you delineated between mentorship and sponsorship. Can you kind of explain a little further about what those two are?
Sure. I mean, sometimes a mentor might be someone you just reach out to and you run some things by, they give you advice, and that's it. A sponsor is more active in really trying to help find that, maybe that next role for you, that next opportunity, those connections, far more active. And as the example, I would say at Genzyme, Henry, at one point when we were chatting in a one-on-one, said, I really think that you could be a general manager. And this was before I had been. And my reaction was, well, I don't have an MBA. And he said, well, you've done more on the job than you'll ever get an MBA. But said, sure, take one of those executive business classes and or courses to get a certificate. So I did do that. But then he and the person I was working for, John Butler, who's the CEO of Akebia, who was also an amazing mentor for me, together really crafted opportunities for me to get that path to a general manager. And so that was part of John splitting up his P&L and giving me responsibility that I mentioned, Japan and Asia Pacific. He didn't have to do that, but it gave me that accountability, responsibility that I could learn so that I could take over my own business and understand. So those were the two most probably important mentors I've had in my career, but they worked together too to find those opportunities. And it was active. Again, it wasn't just, okay, giving me advice and thoughts and ideas. It was actively opening those doors for me.
That's incredible. Yeah, it seems like they were, just true advocates and champions, which I think is amazing. And, for maybe folks that are listening that maybe don't really have, aren't able to work in an environment where those types of opportunities are kind of embedded into like the DNA of the company. I'm sure you may have come across that just in the mentoring that you do when, different folks with different professional cultures. What would you give if you had to give any advice on to those? How would you find that, key mentor or that key sponsor?
Yeah, it's harder to say how do you find, but it's because hopefully there are people that you're working with, you come across that see your potential and want to help. But that's easier said than done. I think you have to actively network. And you don't go to someone and say, can you be my mentor? I've had people do that, but it's an awkward thing to say. Part of it is reaching out and saying, hey, I just love to hear your career and maybe get some advice and slowly developing that relationship. Because I think again, mentor easy, someone does a call with you or meets for a coffee. That's easy. Becoming a sponsor is a bit more commitment from that person, but so that's usually developed over a relationship. Easier if you're working with that person, let's say they're higher up in the organization. But I think it's is taking that time to actively develop that relationship where then the person will want to say, you know what, I know I can open some doors, or more actively participate in the person's growth. But again, it's easiest to seek that around your circle if it's in your current work, or again, just friends who might know people who would be happy to connect you.
I love that. And it's almost like the start with the inner circle approach and then just kind of expand as needed.
Yeah, yeah. Because again, you can find mentors who'll give you a time. People reach out cold and, all right, sure, I'll give a call, but I can't sponsor. I don't know them enough to go out of, to because if I'm let's say sponsoring someone, I am really vouching for them, right? And so you have to know them and be confident yourself that you're putting someone in a trajectory that they're not going to fail, because that reflects on you.
Yeah, that definitely makes a lot of sense. And kind of on that note too, about network formation and building, can you tell us a little bit more about the sisterhood? I know that you have a group for women CEOs that are really about networking, especially kind of in today's business landscape. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, it's an interesting term, sisterhood, but I wasn't the one that coined it. But it's a group of women. We are now about 150 female
Oh, incredible.
CEOs, or a few people like me who have been CEOs that want to be part of this to help that next generation.
Mhm.
When I was a CEO, I struggled to find many female CEOs, and you don't appreciate that some of the importance of having someone that might be going through some of the same things that you are, to really bounce ideas off of. And this was now probably 2018. I put a lunch together with as many female CEOs as I could find, at least in the New England area. And I think there were 15, 12 of us were in person. It was tiny. And again, now I said that this group is over 150, and it's across East Coast, West Coast. And I have to say that it was another group of women on the West Coast who started this
Oh,
a couple of years ago. And it's pretty amazing. We've done an in-person retreat, not with the whole 150, with about 50, and just that connection to have someone to bounce things off of is so critically important. And we have like a Slack channel where everybody's on the full 150 and share. If someone's going through a financing, getting advice, compensation issues, getting advice. But when we, most especially in person, when we got to build those relationships, it became a safe space. I will tell you, there are things that being a woman, there may be some different issues that come up, challenges that you don't feel comfortable with sharing as a CEO to your board. But having a group of executives who've been there, done that, is incredibly powerful. And I feel like it's just a group that's helping lift everybody up. When I was a young engineer first coming out of school, I will tell you, because there was very few women in engineering, it was almost like it was competitive. Women weren't helping women. It's totally different today. It's so wonderful that everybody just wants to help each other grow and see each other's successes. So that's what that's all about.
that's absolutely incredible. And I really love the spirit of, camaraderie and just being able to have people that you can lean on that, if anything, can tell you that you are not alone, which I
Yes.
think is so important.
Yeah.
And kind of taking that, I would love to kind of now dive into your advisor and kind of board work, your VC work. I think all of that is so incredible because you really have been on both sides of the coin, right? You've been a founder and now you're kind of in this position. Would love if you could, maybe we could start with your board and advising work. Would love if you can share some of your insights, as you're kind of in this position, you're seeing these companies, scale and grow. What are the challenges and opportunities for women in leadership positions in the roles that you're seeing?
Yeah. Well, there's a ton of opportunity for women leadership positions. I still think there's a lot of room to put more women in positions. But there's studies, and I don't even need to cite them, that shows that diversity has a huge positive impact, frankly, on top line and bottom line for companies. And so there's no question that diversity in general, not just gender diversity, does yield positive results. Just the fact that you have different thoughts and the way people think, and the way people execute around the table is critically important. I think that a lot of the attributes that have traditionally, I think, been, let's say, female, more female attributes in leadership, I am seeing those are so critically important. And of course, our male leaders are embracing them too. And it has a lot to do with the importance of, let's say, culture and team and how we make decisions. Look, women can make tough decisions. I had to as a CEO. I still do. I have to sometimes say, nope, this is what we're doing and this is why. But I think there is a tendency for more inclusion and understanding, first, of getting all the information, making sure that you've really listened and communicated. Again, it's a strength, I think, of a lot of women, is that listening and communication, which is so important. But again, I'm not saying our male counterparts don't have that. They absolutely do. But I think that's what's shifting in, let's say, in leadership, is more those types of those attributes. I think also women tend to be able to juggle a lot, and they're juggling home and family and able to lead companies, and so we need to give more women the opportunity to be able to do that, to balance both the family side and being able to be successful in running a company or in the highest leadership roles that we're seeing. So there is a lot more women in these roles, just not enough. If you look at the stats, and I'll talk life sciences specifically, it's 50-50 across most companies until you start to hit leadership roles, and then it starts to trickle down. A lot of times when a company reaches out to pitch their, they want to do a fundraise, I look quickly, it's like, okay, all men, or especially if people reach out to me for boards, like, oh, okay, they're all men. And are they looking to add a token female, or are they really thinking about diversity? You have to really think about that. And so again, it's important that companies are thinking about it early. I will say it's hard because for early companies, and it goes back to venture again. There are not enough women in venture capital. It is the way it is, and hopefully that'll keep changing over time. But the early boards on all these early companies they're representatives of the venture firms. So there's just more men. So that's why you also have a tendency to see a mostly male board, especially in early companies.
That's actually really interesting. I didn't realize kind of the interdependency and how all of that does kind of lead this interesting cycle.
Yeah.
And you had kind of mentioned, when you are kind of thinking about the board positions, if that's kind of being offered, are you kind of looking at the matrix to see, if what that diversity would look like with your perspective? It's interesting that you had kind of mentioned, am I just a token in this board, or do I have something to offer? Which I think is a very valid and important question.
Yeah. I'm at a point where, because if I'm going to take on a board seat, I'm probably going to take on one more or whatever, and I'm very picky. So that's why I am looking, am I really going to contribute? I've counseled some of my other female counterparts who, let's say, they don't have their first board seat. I've said to them, it's okay, take it if it's just because of gender, because sometimes once you get on one board, you've got that experience. It's so valuable to be on a board and see how the whole governance model, et cetera. And then you could, it gives you that opening to get on more boards. So I usually actually do tell them, if or any diversity, if that's the reason they're putting you on, that's okay. Get on the board, get that experience. Obviously, you have to, add value and make sure you do, and then you can continue to look for other boards that may make more sense for you, that fit what you have to offer.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I just wanted to ask, I mean, when you think about your career pathway, engineer, CEO, venture, these are unfortunately very traditionally male-dominated fields. And for you, I mean, I know I have so many questions really about this kind of on a broader scale, since, I'm sure you have a wealth of knowledge that you can impart on all of us. But I think just to kind of add your own personal perspective as someone who's really been in these positions, are there any strategies or initiatives or kind of things you had to do to break down barriers as you are navigating, very real challenges being in these industries?
Yeah. It's not as much from the engineering side, but I think it was more when it came to leadership roles. I grew up in a very traditional very traditional Greek family where the male role was, it was a hierarchy. And that's how I grew up. And there was probably a little bit of that in the back of my mind. So I never raised my hand initially for leadership roles, and which I now say to people, raise your hand. And again, if I didn't have the mentors that I had that I mentioned at Genzyme, I would be in a very different place. And also my husband also who encouraged me too, and who completely supported me. That from a personal perspective, those are the things that mattered, because Henry Tamir, for example, I mean, the fact that he said, you can be a general manager, of course, my first reaction is, but I don't have this or that. And he said, no, you don't need that. You've learned that. And and just based on what you've done, I see that you can do this. So for me, that was important. So flipping it to how I'm probably guiding others, I am saying, make sure you raise your hand early. Don't sit back and don't. Again, there's stats on this too. How, like, if there's a job role and there's 10 requirements, there may be a female might have two and say, or may have, look, sorry, 8 and say I can't go for it, and a male might have 2 and say, well, I'm going to go for it. There's just been studies that show this. I'll give you an example. I have a woman who worked for me. She's incredible, and she was head of commercial, but then we were trying to give her more experience and made her a general manager. This was at Exia, to give her a broader view that included development and getting a product through approval, so not just commercial, because everybody always saw her as just commercial. And so when she left there and she was looking for roles, she said to me, she was basically most of the roles that were coming to her from recruiters were chief commercial officers, because that was the bulk of her role. I said, but what do you want to do? She said, no, I want to maybe be a COO, chief operating officer. I love that full aspect of across the business. I said, well, then put it out there. Because they are looking at it, but if you put it out there and talk to recruiters, just talk to people, this is what you want to do. She got that role. And now I'm telling her she needs to do the next step as CEO. But I think that's part of it, is being more forward as to what you want and putting it out there. Again, that's not just a female thing. I advise that on anybody. And the more you talk to people, then you will see maybe there are areas you need to still work on. That's okay. I'm not saying you're going to get it just because you put it out there, but you'll get feedback and you'll see where are the areas I need to strengthen. Maybe I do need to take a bridge job before so I can get that next role that I want.
Right. That's just great. I'm going to hold on to that. That is really, really good advice. I think there is no shame in just being forward and knowing what you want, and kind of taking those next steps. I think that is really just good advice. We do have a question from the audience. I do want to make sure that we spend some time to get to it. So the question reads, I think this is where you put on also your life sciences biopharma hat as well. In light of some of the exponential growth in healthcare AI and telehealth technologies, particularly during the pandemic, do you think that traditional healthcare systems are becoming obsolete? If so, how is 5AM Ventures positioning itself to support disruptive innovations that not only offer financial returns, but improve patient outcomes as well?
Oh, yes. Well, are things, yeah, absolutely. The systems, I think there's some, I'm not sure what the question meant on systems, as in also the healthcare that includes reimbursement and things like that, and the way medicine is practiced. I think there is some sense of both of those needing to catch up to where we need to get to, and where the technologies are advancing, like AI, et cetera. I think that we, like most venture firms, are looking at that space, and how, one, it starts with how actually that type of AI machine learning can help with drug targeting and development. So early on identifying targets and really making sure that there's higher specificity. And so that type of technology can help with that. And then even the different types of tools and in terms of the technology, increasing that higher, again, directed specificity, that sort of thing. rather than a drug that, kind of hits multiple different systems and organs, lots of side effects. So I'm hoping we're moving into an era that we are more targeted with our therapies, and therefore, does that translate into how medicine is even practiced, and it changes that's going to be a long ways away. Again, I'm not sure where the question was, again, on the where it was stemming from. But of course, as a venture firm who has traditionally built new companies, we've always been in the forefront of new technologies, and that's balanced. I will say, in this financial market, it has to be a bit more balanced. If we have a very smart group of people who love new technologies. We can't put all our money, all our investors' money, because we have LPs, in all of the early, risky, most novel technologies, because we do have to bring an expected returns. So we are also still investing in technologies that maybe are more proven, that we have a more security, that are going into the clinic with a line of sight to approval, and so it's a balance of a portfolio. You can't just put everything in all that the new cool stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that makes a lot of sense. Very balanced approach. And I think for you, because you are, really in the forefront and what you're seeing in the landscape, I think just personally, are there any innovations or advancements, just thing that you're seeing, that you're hearing about, that you're just excited?
Well, lots of things. I mean, I am excited about what we're doing at Insoma. That's just I wouldn't be doing it if I wasn't. It's
Definitely.
What's traditionally been done ex vivo, taking stem cells out of the body and modifying them, ablating a patient and putting it back. We would be doing it with a one-time injection,
Oh, wow.
and the outpatient. And the reason it excites me, not only because of that, but having spent a lot of time launching rare disease drugs, which are very expensive and sometimes inaccessible to patients, being able to change the game on accessibility is important. So we have these amazing technologies like CRISPR and base editing, but there's a delivery issue, and how that it can be treated. So if we can do that with a one-time injection in an outpatient setting, even in sub-Saharan Africa for diseases like sickle cell, I mean, that would be so game-changing. So that is one thing that it excites me quite a bit. And then I still have personally a soft spot for rare diseases in general. So I'm constantly looking at different ways of addressing rare diseases. And the other area that I'm focusing my time on, and this is not a technology, because there are technologies that excite me, but it's more of I guess I'm more thinking about patient and people, is women's health. It's an area that I've just grown increasingly passionate about, not because of any like personal issue, just because it's an unmet need. I've always been drawn to these high unmet needs. We have 50% of the population in the world, and the diseases that address them or affect them are not addressed. There's only about 1% of investment dollars goes into women's health outside of oncology. And only about 2% of the development pipeline today is in women's health. And these are things that it's not just, fertility and reproduction. It's also things like PCOS, endometriosis, or even diseases like there's autoimmune diseases like MS that predominantly affect women, that affect everyone, but predominantly women. And why is that? What's going on with the immunology there? So that's an area that I'm very focused on.